For those of you unfamiliar with Airbnb, it's a website that allows users to either list or rent residential properties. For people with a spare room or apartment, it's a nice way to earn some extra cash. And for everyone else, it's a convenient and cheap alternative to staying in a hotel. But with the site becoming so successful, and with millions of people making use of its service, there have inevitably been some hosts and guests from hell. Here are 3 disturbing Airbnb experiences. This happened to me on a trip to Lyon, France. I was travelling solo from the States, and had booked to stay with this old couple in their house. I say old, they must have been in their mid-60s. It was a new listing, and only had a couple of reviews, but they were both really positive. From the photos, I could tell that this place wasn't exactly a 5-star joint, but for the price, it was a steal, and in a great location to boot. That first night when I arrived, the older couple actually made dinner for me. It was a nice touch, and who was I to refuse? Their English was decent, so we chatted and shared a few stories, and afterwards I went to explore the city and get a few drinks. I must have returned around 10 PM, and my hosts were nowhere to be seen. In bed asleep, I figured. The pair had told me at dinner to help myself to a little wine, which is precisely what I did when I got in. Nice folks. Afterwards, I went up to my bedroom to settle down myself. Now, I usually have trouble sleeping, but that night I fell asleep with surprising ease. All the travelling that day had worn me out, and that little bit of wine probably helped too, I guess. I'm not sure what time it was, but I awoke in the night to a flash of lightning. You know when your eyes are closed, but you can still tell there was a flash of bright light? Well, it was just like that. I remained curled up in bed with my eyes still shut, waiting for the crash of thunder to come with it. I counted the passing seconds in my head. My mum always used to tell me that however many seconds there were between the lightning and thunder, that was how many miles away it had struck. So I'm there, counting away in my head. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20, 30. That's odd, I thought. No thunder. It was then, through closed eyelids, that I sensed another lightning flash. Again, I waited for the thunder, but it never came. I sat up in bed and opened my eyes, just to see if my sleep-hazed mind was playing tricks on me. It hadn't been. Inside my bedroom were my 2 hosts. Initially, I didn't realize just how bizarre this situation was. I was still in that confused, just out of sleep state. Even still, I knew there was something off about their expressions. As my eyes adjusted, I could tell what was wrong. They were both wearing masks, latex masks of old human faces with exaggerated features. The flashes had been from the camera the woman was holding. They'd been taking pictures of me whilst I slept. The husband was nearer to the bed than the wife though, and he was in mid-step, moving closer. She was further back by the door. It was as if he wanted to be in the pictures. With me now awake, they both froze like a pair of mannequins. What do you want? At the time, I couldn't think of anything else to say. The adrenaline hadn't kicked in yet. I was more confused than freaked out. "You're dreaming," said the male, his voice muffled behind the latex mask. Then, backing up towards the door. "Good night." It wasn't until I noticed the metal wrench in the old man's hand that the situation fully dawned on me. I quickly gathered my shit and made for the front door, glancing around like crazy in case the old fucks tried to ambush me with the wrench from around a corner. Needless to say, I contacted the police immediately, though nothing ever came of it, My evidence was all anecdotal. The old geezers had been smart enough to delete all of the pictures. My complaints to Airbnb were largely ignored too, though the old couple did remove their listing from the site. I don't know what all of that was about. Some cult-like shit? A messed up fetish? Some fucking potential snuff pictures they were making. The old man was definitely in the shots, and it was clear that he was trying to step towards me quietly, wrench in hand. Whatever the case, I'll never complain about being a light sleeper again. I still check Airbnb regularly, just to make sure they don't use it to lure anyone else in. I'm a male living in South Korea. My cousin, Nari, used to be an Airbnb hostess here in Seoul. The site's become massive. There's something like 2 million properties listed on it, so no matter where you're traveling to in the world, chances are that there's somebody with a room or a condo or even an entire house to rent. During her time hosting, Nari met a whole bunch of colourful characters. There were the sweet older couple that came to stay with her 8 times while visiting friends in the city. There was the guy who insisted on bringing his dog with him, this little rat-sized chihuahua that was about half the size of my cat's. There were a few people who were high maintenance, and there were a few who were really chilled, and ended up joining us for drinks at the bar down the street. I never hosted personally, but I'd help Nari out with her bookings if she had to work late and needed someone to meet her guests. Well, for all the good people, there was Mr. Park. He was this creepy, balding guy that stayed with Nari for a week while he was in town on business. At least, he said that was his reason anyway. I think we were both relieved when he left. I'd met him once, and didn't like the vibe I got off the guy, and there wasn't much she could do to kick him out early or anything, lest he gave her a bad review and dropped her score on the site. After he left, Nari discovered a weird plastic thing he had left in the shower. Turns out, he had left his slimy, fake vagina masturbation aid sitting next to her soap. I took one look and had to explain to her what it was. I remember her picking it up in a plastic bag, like the way people scoop up dog shit on the street. From then on, Nari was pretty picky when it came to who she let stay. One weekend, Nari had to leave for a business trip, so she left me the spare key. She had a booking coming up, a young woman named Sumi, and I was to play host. We'll just call her Sue from here. Sue checked in, got the key from me, and put her suitcase in the spare room. I didn't see any more of her that Friday, or for the rest of the weekend, and I figured she was out enjoying herself. Not too long after that, I could have sworn I saw Mr. Park in our local grocery store. Same balding head, same vibe, but he was at one end of the aisle and I the other. I got that feeling like I was being watched, but when I looked directly, he was gone. At the time, I shrugged it off, figured it had to be some other balding guy, and I was just projecting my anxiety. Now, the building I live in is fairly old, which means that the walls are pretty thick, and noise tends to only travel in the hallway. If I'm waiting for the elevator, I can occasionally hear someone's TV if it's really loud, but that's about it. That Monday morning, I was woken up far too early by a pounding sound. It was maybe 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and the sun was barely up. At that point, I was pissed. I threw on a housecoat and yanked open the front door without bothering to look in the peephole. I was greeted by 2 very tense policemen. They asked for my name, and if I knew the young woman who lived across the hall from me, pointing to Nari's apartment. Without thinking, I ran across the hall and through the open door, just knowing in my gut that Nari was supposed to be returning that morning, and that something must be wrong if there were police at my door. The cops yelled for me to wait, but I was on autopilot. At first, I thought someone had robbed the place. Her TV was smashed, Her couch was ripped apart like it had been mauled by a bear. Her photos were buried under broken glass. Her laptop had practically melted into the floor. And then I realized, in some part of my brain, that her TV and laptop wouldn't be here if it was a simple robbery. And that's when I smelled it. Death has a certain stench to it. Sometimes, if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, like a hospital corridor, you'll get a whiff of it. What I smelled was a full-on, closed-handed fist slug into the face. In a panic, I couldn't stop myself. I flung open the first bedroom door. Nuri's room looked just like the living room, but she wasn't in it. By this time, the officers had caught up with me and were trying to steer me back out of the unit, but I broke free of their grasp and flung open the spare bedroom door. Inside was what was left of Sue. We get so desensitized to violence on TV that when we're actually confronted with it in real life, it seems almost absurd, like it's totally unreal. She had literally been torn to shreds with a knife. Just from smelling the air alone, I could taste that metallic flavor of blood in the back of my mouth. I showered several times a day for the next week and could not get that taste, that smell out of my hair or skin. It turns out that Sue had been there since Friday night. Nari got home a few hours later. By that time, the forensics team had already been in and out and were starting to clean up the scene. I couldn't tell her about what I'd seen. I just remember hugging her. While investigating, the police had found a second set of keys. This meant there was actually a third set of keys to Nari's place, and those keys had prints. 3 guesses as to who they traced back to. Mr. Park. Park had made a set of keys while staying at Nari's, and he wasn't here on business as he had claimed. It turns out he lived about 15 minutes outside of the city. Security camera footage showed him coming into the building that Friday night, and him lurking around outside for the past month prior to that, just after his stay. Surprisingly, Park confessed to the murder, said he didn't know that Nari would be out of town, that he hadn't known she had had a guest that weekend. His wife had recently left him and taken the kids with her, and Nari reminded him of a younger version of his wife. Nari and I have both moved buildings since then. I still can't believe that all of this came because of broken trust. By giving a stranger a safe place to stay, by letting him into her home, this person was so twisted that he thought to make a copy of her key. If it had been any other weekend, Nari would have been at home, and what happened to Sue would have happened to her too. This happened about 2 years ago when I was 19. My girlfriend, friends and I were travelling from London to Bangkok and had booked a cheap place to stay on Airbnb. It was situated down this creepy little alley that had no lights. It was a tight squeeze too, only about the width of one person. Eventually we get our act together and head down in single file and come to this really shoddy looking building. No, this can't be the place. We thought we'd booked an established house online, but this place was a shithole. It was small, run down, and shadier than Slim himself. But hey, it was super cheap, and we were all really tired from travelling, so we thought, screw it, we can put up with this for a few nights. The dude hosting us is there, waiting, and he's this creepy little guy. He offered us a few bottles of Coca-Cola, but the bottles were really dirty. It looked like they'd been used before, like they'd been left in the trash and refilled. We politely declined. There was something evidently wrong about this guy. He was this short little dude with a crooked smile and a hunched over back as well. Sort of reminded me of a jockey from Left 4 Dead, if I'm honest. But it wasn't his appearance that made me wary. It was the way he was acting around the girls in our group, getting a little too close for comfort. He was thirsty for something other than dirty cola, I'll tell you that much. After a few choice glares, he leaves the keys with us and goes on his merry way, allowing us to enjoy our stay in peace. All of the double bedrooms were next door to one another. The rooms were tiny, and the air conditioning unit kept dripping on me during the night, but otherwise they were somewhat acceptable. So the next morning rolls around, and we all go to check out the sights. Around midday, I started getting some serious stomach problems, so decided to go back to the hotel with one of my friends, Helena. She'd been having trouble sleeping for a while, and wanted to try and get some rest. The two of us got back to the house. Helena's room was the one next to mine. She gave me a hug and went to take her nap. I spent about half an hour mucking around on my laptop when I decided to take a shower. Now, the bathroom in my room was ridiculously small, and I'm a 6'2" guy, so there was barely any room to move. It had a shower, a toilet, and a sink all somehow squeezed inside. A claustrophobic's nightmare. There was also a little glazed window that didn't open. So I have my shower, and everything's hunky-dory. When I finish, I go to open the door, but it won't open. The door's somehow broken and jammed shut. I try for a good long while to open it, but it won't budge at all. I start banging on the wall, knowing that my friend is on the other side and should be able to hear me. But she doesn't. I bang even louder, and still nothing. These walls weren't thick, so I was confused as to why she couldn't hear me. I would have obviously have called my friends on my mobile, but all of my stuff was in the bedroom. About 30 minutes go by. Since there's no ventilation in the room, I'm feeling a little lightheaded from all of the steam from the hot shower. I tried to open up that shitty little window, but just like the door, it's sealed tighter than a bull's arsehole in fly season. All this time, I've been trying to get Helena's attention. About 2 hours in, I hear someone enter the room. Thank God, I think. She's finally heard me. I yell through the door and tell her to try and open it from the other side, but there's no response. Instead, I hear squeaking, like somebody's bouncing on the bed. Then I hear laughter, but it's not Helena. It's a man's voice. "Who the hell's there?" I shout, seriously hoping one of my friends had come back and was messing with me or something. The laughter stopped abruptly, and a man responded to me in Thai. I have no idea what he said, but from the tone of his voice, I knew it was something threatening. The laughter resumes immediately after he says this. Now, I don't know if this guy has a weapon, or even what he wants. If he was going to rob me, all of my stuff was already there for the taking. Why was he sticking around and laughing? This goes on for what must have been 10 minutes. And then, suddenly, dead silence. Had he left? It begins to dawn on me the reason Helena might not have been responding. I start trying to break down the door, but it's surprisingly sturdy, and despite my size, I'm far from athletic. Only a minute passes, and all of my friends return from sightseeing. I yell to my friend Ross to get me out. He tries to open it, but eventually it becomes clear the only way I'm getting out is by smashing down that door. So that's what we do. When I'm out, everybody's there, including Helena. Turns out she had just taken some sleeping pills and had fallen into such a deep sleep that she couldn't even hear my banging for help. I was extremely relieved to see she was okay. Absolutely nothing was missing from my room. To me, the culprit was pretty obvious. Our pervy jockey host. I suspect he must have fled when he heard my friends coming back. The others didn't see anyone. Needless to say, we all got the hell out of there, and took up in a hotel for the rest of the trip. When I next went online to warn others in a review, the listing on Airbnb had mysteriously disappeared. To this day, I wonder whether the host had somehow planned for that door to jam, like some sort of trap. I also wonder what would have happened if my girlfriend had returned instead of me, or if he had simply realized Helena was alone in the other room. The best things happen in the dark.